So now we're going to cover advanced settings on your BD Blender. In the previous video we covered just basic operation. So from there what we're going to do is go through all the settings that this control is capable of. So to get to your settings, you press the button with the 3 lines, and I'm just going to go through from top to bottom. First button, recipe book. You can save recipes, and you can have different alarm settings for each recipe, and you can name each recipe whatever you'd like to name them. The next button here is your inventory page, material used. It'll show you how much material you use through each gate and a total. Also gives you your average batch time, capability, how many batches you've ran, process rate, and capacity utilization. To clear this, you'll hit the delete button and it'll reset the inventory. So once we click yes, it all sets it back to 0. Go back to this screen. If you touch here, while your blender's running, you can see the target value and the actual value. So you can make sure you're accurately dispensing material. Next button is recipe format. All the blenders ship set up in easy recipe mode. This allows the color to be a percentage of your virgin material and your regrind to be a percent of the batch. If you just want to run straight percent mode, if you touch this button, it'll change it to straight percent mode. The next button, there's another format, parts mode. So if you want to enter your recipe in parts instead of percentage, you can do that. And I'm going to leave it on percent mode, and I'll show you the main screen how it changes. So we'll change percent mode, hit the home button, and it's going to tell you now that your recipe doesn't equal 100%. When you're in percentage or parts mode, it has to equal 100%. So right now we see we have 40% on 3, 1% on 2. So we need to make up the rest, so we'll set 59% on 1. And then once it equals 100, you'll get the confirm change button. Back to the settings under recipe format. We also have batch size, and that's just how much weight will fit in your weigh hopper. So if you're running a lot of regrind and the bulk density is low, you'll have to set your batch size lower. We also have an inventory shutdown feature, so if you're filling Gaylords, you can set this to 1,000 pounds. It will track the inventory. Once you hit 1,000 pounds, it'll stop the blender automatically and give you an alert. If you're not using this inventory shutdown, you'll want to set it to 0. Metering order is simply the order we feed the ingredients. So 1 through 4 is standard. You can change it if you want to put your color into the mix first, or the virgin last and the regrind color first. You can change the order. Batch ready is always enabled. That just means that even when the blender is at high level in the mixer, you'll always have a batch ready in the weigh hopper. And right now we always send these out default weigh every batch. If for some reason your blender won't keep up with your process, you can change this to weigh every other batch all the way out to every 5th batch. What that'll do is the non-weighed batches will meter off of time, and all the gates open at the same time. So it will speed up the blender, and you'll get a higher process rate. The other thing here is change recipe without stopping. If for some reason you want your operators to stop the blender before they change a recipe, you can enable that. We're going to come back to calibration. The next button, or the next menu we'll look at is alarm settings. So under alarms, you see you have hopper 1 through 4, you have retry and alarm, and percent overfeed limit. So you can set these alarms to either retry, no retry, alarm, or no alarm. if you set it to no retry, it's going to dispense the material one time, and whether it hits the target or not, it's going to move to the next ingredient. If you turn the alarm off and you run out of material, you'll never get an alarm. The only real reason you'd ever want to set your alarm to no retry is if you're running a regrind that's not consistent, so you're doing grinding beside your press, feeding straight back into the blender, and that regrind won't always be present, you may want to change your alarm to no retry. The other buttons on the screen are accept recipe alarm. So if you turn that on and your operator forgets to click the check mark, it'll give you an alarm. Also, low levels are alarm only. So you can set your, if you had, we saw optional low level proximity sensors that you can mount to the sight glass area. They give you a little quicker heads up than just running out of material. And they can be set to just alarm, or they can be treated as out of material, which will stop the blender at that point. Your alarm silence is set up here. 60 seconds is factory. You can make it longer or shorter depending on how you want it. And then gate feed limit for the overfeed. Most customers aren't going to use overfeed. It's for very critical components, and you can set a percent in there, and if you have an overfeed, you can stop the blender on overfeed. Mixer and dump setting is our next screen. So you have dump time, that's how long your weigh hopper door will open and close. 2 seconds is default, and it's usually adequate for any material, but if for some reason it's not emptying in 2 seconds, you can increase that number. We also have a dump delay. This will allow the mixer to start before we dump the material in, so if you have really dense, heavy material or something that's hard to mix, you may want to start the mixer before you dump the weigh hopper. Dump cycles will open and close the dump door more than once. That way, if you have any kind of dusty, sticky material, you can open and close it a couple times to shake it loose. Mix time is how long your mixer will run after it makes a batch. Remix allows you to, so if your machine sits idle a lot and you're noticing that you're getting some separation while it's sitting, you can have a remix come back on maybe every 30 seconds or a minute just to turn the mixer back on to remix the material. Mixer dump time, that's if you have a knife gate below your mixer. Time mixing is our standard, so that means we're going to mix for the 10 seconds, then just stop. You can also set this to continuous mixing, which means as soon as you hit start, the mixer runs and it doesn't stop till you hit stop. We have a feature, if you want, you can have a mixer failure alarm. You can add there's 2 ways we do it, a dry contact on the motor control protector, or you can add an inductive proximity sensor to the mix chamber to sense the mixer turning. Either way, if you enable that alarm and it fails, you can have it either stop or just alarm. Mixer manual mode, normal, and the other option is cyclic. If you change it to cyclic, it's going to start and stop every 10 seconds like it does when it's making a batch. Normal just runs all the time when you click on the mixer icon on the cleanout page. And then we're mixing single batches. If you're not getting a homogeneous mix operating in mixed single batches, you can set this to mix to high level. So what that'll do is it won't open your knife gate below the blender until it hits the high level switch. So you'll have more than one batch mixed together in the mixing chamber. And then we have mixer bump time. So this feature is to make sure your mixer doesn't stop in front of the proximity sensor. So if it does, every once in a while we just bump it a quarter second to keep it from in front of the proc switch and giving you a false high level. So that's all your mixer and dump setup. Next button on here is just your time and date. So to set that, just use the arrow keys. And then set your time and date. Next we have units. So the information on your blender can be in pounds or kilograms. This simply changes the tag, so like it'll say pounds, but if you're changing to pounds or if you change to kilograms, you need to calibrate the blender for pounds or kilograms. So if you notice on our calibration weight, we give the value in pounds and kilograms. Your next, network settings. So there's a couple different things with the net. This blender uses Ethernet, so there's a couple things. You have a built-in server that you can communicate and redisplay your display on your tablet or computer. You can also communicate to the PLC with a SCADA package, or we have our own package called BlendTrack and a package called MyView, so you can do data acquisition from your blender. And if you're going to do anything like that, this is where you'll set your IP address for the screen and the PLC. Next we have I/O status. So from this screen you can see all the input and output status on for the PLC. And then we have service info. So the service info button or page shows you a button that gives you your serial number. That serial number has to be set. It should come from the factory, set to the proper serial number for the blender. We need to have that serial number in case you're doing any kind of SCADA package or MyView, so we know which machine we're communicating with. Also, it shows you the PLC version and the HMI version at the bottom of the screen. Also gives you the handy number, so if you need service or parts, you can give our 1-800 number a call. So now before we go to advanced settings, we'll go to calibration. So in our basic setup video, we showed you how to calibrate the blender, but there's a couple other options under here. There's calibrate feeder, direct scale readout, and calibrate feeder setup. So I'll start with calibrate feeder. If you touch this, it just gives you a menu that says calibrate feeder, press start to begin new calibration, and it shows you the hopper weight. What we're doing with feeder calibration, and typically you don't need to do this on a BD style blender. If you had an OA style blender that has the same type of control, you may want to. When you hit start, it's going to dispense a known weight, and it's going to figure out how many pounds per second can go through your feeder. And that's how we basically determine how long to keep the gate open. So if we need to feed 1 pound out of hopper 2, we know we need to keep that gate open for 4 seconds. Every time we make a batch, we update that value. So you'll constantly see this value update as we're blending. The next thing we see here, we already did the calibration before, so we'll look at direct scale readout. Direct scale readout is helpful for if you're troubleshooting a load cell issue. You can see we have separate readings for load cell A and B. We show the current weight, current bits, and then up here we show the last calibration 0 bits and last calibration bits. These numbers correlate to the signal coming from your load cell. So if you look right now, we have 3028 bits. Basically that means you should see 3 millivolts DC coming from your load cell, and it converts it to a digital signal inside the PLC. But this is a good troubleshooting aid. A lot of times when your load cells go bad, you'll see this value either read 0 or read very high, like 20,000, with no weight on it, and that's a good indication that you have a bad load cell. The other thing under this is the calibrate feeder setup. And this is just where you put in your value, your known value for calibrating the feeder. So it's a percentage of the batch. So right now we have a 4-pound batch. If you're calibrating a feeder that you're using a very small amount of color or expensive additive in, you don't want to dispense too much of that for the feeder calibration. So you can either, lower this value if you don't want to dispense as much for your feeder calibration. So we'll go back to the main screen here. Next thing we have is advanced settings. So if we click here on advanced settings, this is where we do like all our system setup, and we can do some tuning for accuracy. So the first button here is system setup. This just gives you your hopper layout, and if you're using easy recipe, you can label each hopper, so you can decide which hopper you want to run your natural, your additive, or your regrind out of. Typically we like to run regrind out of hopper 3. There's a square gate installed on hopper 3 instead of a diamond gate. But as far as the additives, you could run them out of 2 or 4, or you can run virgin out of 2 or 4. Any other ones are interchangeable. Also, if you ever add a component, this is where you'd set it up. You'll see on this side of the screen, it tells you have 2 load cells. Our auger blenders use 1, so this is changeable. It also gives you which load cell input card we're using. So there's more than one selection, so if you ever have an issue with your blender, you have to change it. Just verify you have the right card selected. And we also have a built-in convey system that's an option. So if you purchase that option, you get an extra output card and you can use the built-in convey. Back to advanced settings. One other thing, nano feed options. So on some of our blenders, we use a very small nano feeder, which will feed a very low percentage of material. This is the settings for that feature. I'm not going to go into it too much, but it's where you can adjust the nano feeder. Next, we have advanced alarm settings. So these alarms cover things that aren't involved with dispensing the material through the gate. It tells you how many retries you'll get before alarm. That means how many times the gate will cycle before it tells you it's out of material. Percent above batch for alarm. So if for some reason the weigh hopper goes 45% above the batch size or whatever you set it to, it's going to give you an over max alarm. Max tare offset. As long as when we empty the weigh hopper, it's within a pound of being 0, we re-zero the weigh hopper before making the next batch. Unable to make rate. So we can give you an alarm if your blender will not keep up with your process. Overfeed batch delay. If you're using the overfeed alarm, you can delay that alarm by a number of batches. So if it overfeeds a little bit one time, it doesn't stop the blender. Overfeed count limit applies to the same thing. Then we have the mixer failure. We talked about that a little bit earlier when we were talking about the mixer setup. You can set that mixer failure type to MCP or procs. And then you can also enable and disable the alarm depending on whether you have that option. And then these down here, we're going to either run or stop on these alarms. So if we overmax the weigh hopper, we can have it stop. We can have it stop if for some reason we're above that 1 pound max tare offset, and we can have it stop on an overfeed alarm. Okay, back to advanced settings. Advanced weigh options. On this screen, these should all be left default. It's just a weight filter, weight per second filter. That should always stay at 3. And then the batch dump settle time. So what that is after we make a batch, we wait 5 seconds to let the load cells stable back out before we make another batch. And then we're going to go to feed algorithm options. So we discussed earlier that every time we make a batch and open and close the feeder, we look at how many pounds per second go through the feeder. Now we know that you cannot control the feeder that accurately. So if we need force, like as our example, we had 0.25 pounds per second out of the feeder. If we open that feeder for 4 seconds, we know that we're always going to overshoot the value. So what we do is we open for an initial target percent. We have that set to 99, so instead of opening for 4 seconds, we're going to open for 99% of 4 seconds. And then we look at our under limit to make sure that we're within that value of the target. So if our target's 1 pound and we're within 4 thousandths of 1 pound, we don't retry. If we're not within 4 thousandths, say we're 15 thousandths under, we'll open the gate again and make sure that we get within that 4 thousandths target before we move on. The other thing here is gate cycle time. So that's the amount of time we give the gate to open and close. So we know there's a little additional time that we have to add to make sure that the gate gets out of the way. So that's adjustable as well. And then over here you'll see where you can either use hopper 2 and 4 as a standard hopper, which is typically supplied with your blender, or a nano feeder, depending on your options. Some other things we have along the side here, double gate threshold. So if we open and close 5 times and we don't see the target, we're going to double the length of time that we open and close the gate until we hit the target. Standard algorithm enabled, we have 2 different ways we can operate. So if you have a very critical additive, we can change from standard algorithm to advanced algorithm. And what we do in advanced, and I'm not going to get too deep into it, but we will dispense your additive first and match the rest of the ingredients to the additive. So we can get a much more accurate feed that way. The other thing we have here is missing ingredient compensation. So if you're running a lot of regrind and the regrind isn't always present, if you have your batch size set to say 50% regrind and you run out of regrind, if you turn on missing ingredient compensation, it will make up the rest of that batch with the other materials. So you introduce your regrind first with missing ingredient compensation on. If there's no regrind in the hopper, it's going to make that batch up with the additive in the virgin material. And then batches for process rate, that's just how many batches it takes to show you an accurate process rate. In the process rate filter, we update that rate every 3 batches we make. Back to advance. Metering test. So if you're ever having an issue with dispensing out of a gate, you can check the accuracy of that particular gate using the metering test. So you'll set the value of the weight you want to see, and then you can hit start, and it'll just open and close that gate to dispense the weight, and you can check to see how accurate the gate is. The next thing we have here is passwords. So these blenders come shipped from the factory with no passwords installed. So we have 2 levels, operator and supervisor, and you can select the password you'd like. Make sure you keep a good note of that password. If you lose it, you can call us. And if you look here on the service info screen, it gives you a service code. So you want to make sure your date and time is set correctly on your blender, and you can call that number and tell them, hey, I've lost my password, and we can give you a temporary password to reset it. So let's just set a password in here just to show you what it'll do. So we'll set a supervisor password of 1234. And then to log out, well, we want to confirm the change. And then to log out, we'll just hit this button here, and it logs you out. So once you're logged out, now that we have a password installed, you can still access all the screens, but you'll see all the buttons are grayed out, so you can't make any changes. So your operators will still be able to see all the settings, they just won't be able to change them. So if we want to go to advanced settings, same thing, system setup, you can still see all the settings that are in there, you just can't change anything. So, and then as long as there's not an operator password, you can still start and stop. But it just won't let you change in the advanced settings. We can also add a operator password, so let's put our service password in. Then we'll go back to advanced settings, go to passwords, and now let's add an operator password. And then we'll log out. And now with the operator password installed, nobody can do anything. You can still see all the settings, but you can't change anything. So if you want to restrict it so only one person can operate your blender and you give them a password, if you install an operator password, everybody will be able to see everything that's going on, but nobody will be able to start, stop, change recipes, anything else. And I believe that concludes all of the advanced settings on the Blender.